Hi, everyone. I am Jennifer Taylor, regardless what it says my name is there. I am the other half of Gnashing Teeth Publishing. We are celebrating Luke Wortley today and his new book that is coming out on Gnashing Teeth Publishing called Shared Blood. We are over the moon to have this book in our roster and have Luke join our family. As you probably know, publishing requires that we read the manuscript over and over and over again for various reasons. I know that Karen and I were texting back and forth the whole time, saying, every time I read this poem, I see new things that I didn't see the first time. And did you notice this detail in this poem? And every time I read this poem, it punches me in the gut all over again. And it's just an incredible read, incredibly introspective. Um, I want to draw your attention to, I know you don't have copies right now, but it will have a further reading section in the back. We only do that a few times a year, and the reason we chose Shared Blood to do that with is due to the very strong narrative thread and surrealistic imagery. It's just a stellar piece of work. There is a review posted at trampolinepoetry.com. I will put that link in the chat here in a little bit once we get going. So don't worry if you didn't catch that. I think that's it. And we have three poets going before Luke. And so let me introduce you to our first one. Uh, is it Rennerfeldt? Please tell me if I'm right. Yes, QuinnRennerfeldt. Quinn is a queer poet, parent, and partner, earning her MFA at SFSU. Their work can be found in Cleaver, Sand, Elsewhere, Salamander, Fractured Lit, and Flash Frog. Her chapbook, Demigoddess Semi-Lustrous, will be published by Dancing Girl Press in fall of 2023. They are a reader for Split Lip Magazine and Flash Fiction Magazine. And take it away, Quinn.
Thank you so much, Gnashing Teeth, and also thank you to Luke for having me and including me in this reading. It feels really fun to be able to celebrate this full-length manuscript coming out. Luke was kind enough to send me a copy of his chapbook Purge earlier this year, which I just adored. I thought they were wonderful, beautiful prose poems, and they were like so stark in their emotional vulnerability and risk-taking, and I just really appreciate your work. So I'm very happy to be here. I have just a few poems to read. I'm going to start with one that's coming out soon in Chestnut Review, if folks are familiar, called Young Snakes. And I, as mentioned, my bio, I'm a parent, so this is kind of about and for my daughters. Young Snakes. My daughters make young snakes from the purple yarn they dip into bath water, watching them become floss and wearing them as if hair. I scoop each child from the water and perch behind their blonde heads, working the brush's bristles through until I hit a knot and do the hurtful work of separation. I'm turned to stone with every ratted tangle, their small crowns whipping out of reach from the pulling pain. My hand hovers in air to release the stolen strands loosed from the scalp like limp serpents. They float to the floor where they blend into the wood grain and fade from sight like blonde scales hidden in sand. I imagine their hair as fierce vipers, fanged against the warm-blooded world, and some days it is impossible not to feel complicit in the erosion of power that each girl first holds inside the nest of her body. The secret venue that weathers each painful touch, regardless of source, until it hardens into stone and drops from the body like a severed head. The next poem I have is, well, I don't know, I'll just let it speak for itself. The title is Information Enters the Ganglia, Excites the Nerves and Flees. I want to save the big pulsing brain in the bell jar, wed the drooling beast, sop up my tears in its fur. I want to feel a fang raking my vein, shiver at the threat of love and fucking. Someone please pick me up by my ragdoll neck and shake me alive. The day is a way of deciding how I will feel. People the size of poppy seeds move about the city. Salt-colored fog saturates everything. The bus is 30 minutes late, and then 2 buses arrive at the same time. There's no sense to any of this, so I construct my life in miniature. March small figurines on their predictable paths, make them kiss, drive cars, die. But every once in a while, a large cat walks through the scene. Someone inevitably falls over. The boundaries of the world are written anew. In this one, today, we are adding monsters to the village. Rejoice, the town people cry. We are terrified and so very excited. This next poem I have is from a collection that I'm working on and hoping to kind of shop around next year, perhaps, based on queerness and aliens and intercontinental road trips and intergalactic road trips. So this poem from that collection is called The Pill. A day occurs and we wake up conjoined at the mouth, trading breaths. An oppressive emptiness consumes the motel scenery. Nothing, taking bites from the edges. Crown molding distilled into pixels. Windows turned to shreds. The surroundings of sameness dissipates to reveal a stretch of sand like a baked tongue. We walk towards an undulating pool of water on the horizon, each step grating the silence. The alien's hand begins to dissolve in mine. First stone, then jelly, then vapor. The sun strips the alien down, shrinking to the size of a pill. I hold them in my thirsty palm. I kneel at the banks of a mirage, put the alien at the back of my throat, dip lips to the liquid surface. Ingest and hope they will dilate inside me like a sponge, so that I'm never alone, so that when seen through by X-ray beam, they light up like another bone. And then this last poem I have, I picked intentionally, it's kind of new, but I picked it intentionally because it has blood in it. And I was like, oh, it can speak to the title of the collection. So this one's called I Want. I want to watch the teeth in my head explode and fragment into constellations in the dark space of my mouth, to make a mess of red blood and soft cum, to erode the strata of my skin by weathering your presence, to writhe and squirm in the dirt like a thoughtless worm, to peck at the carrion of my corpse, to pull sinew and vein from the bones scaffolding, to unload, to lie down in the road, to become the spine the big cars straddle, to feel precise pressure like a molar wrenched out of the gum, to do violence to myself before anyone else does. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Quinn. That was gorgeous. That last one got me. Next, we will have William Erickson. Hello, William. Welcome. A little bit about him. William Erickson is a living poet. He's here today, living. His work appears in Sixth Finch, Heavy Feather, Spring Formal, West Branch, and elsewhere. William is a 2023 Best New Poet nominee. Congratulations. His most recent chapbook is Sandbox, Bottle Cap Press, and his debut collection is forthcoming with April Gloaming in 2024. Congratulations on that also, sir. He lives in Washington with his partner and their 2 dogs in an old house across the street from a large tree. Yes, thank you, William. Go for it.
Thank you. One of my dogs is sitting directly in front of me and he's very borky today. So I'm going to try and make it through without a lot of borking, but I'll assuage him with pets. Luke, thank you. This is an honor and it's fun. And I'm so stoked to read a few poems with some of my great friends, which always feels special and cool. So many congrats. I don't know, there's so much to say about Luke's work. I just feel the density of your stuff is just like, I don't know, it's devastating. Like I've had the privilege of reading a lot of your stuff. Yeah, and it's devastating. Like I don't know, it's great. So I'm excited to share some weird prose poems alongside yours. I tried to pick some stuff that kind of deals with family relationships a bit. So we'll see how that goes. But Yeah, some short, weird stuff. Turnstile. A father and son stoop to the lip of the earth. The earth hasn't spoken in days, so the father and son make a mouth out of stones. Hunger ladders like a throat, spoons and ladles from its apron, scoops of ghosts. The boy tells his father only secrets. All light is bleeding. When God laughs, oaks and maples turn transparent. Joy is not a feeling, but a man so small even the sea can't kill him. This poem is called Satin Sheets. Night is night, and everyone slouches dusk from a desk chair. Me, I get in bed with science, and science makes my toes exhaust pipes. All day, every day, one long peer review. Then bedtime comes, and I breathe with whales for lungs, bees' eyes blooming from my fingertips. One question no one can answer. Why is seeing such a bottomless phobia? Coenzyme. A place of unbelievable simplicity rises up from the sea. Birds twit, laws apply. All day Sunday diners advertise their breakfast menu. Imagine holding any object like the soldier holds the small white handkerchief, letting pity slip like sea ice to your stomach. But then the war is over and all art retreats into the dim aesthetic reticule of Friday date night. A child walks into the science exhibition with his father's fist-sized heart. The wings beat above the waves beat back. And this is the last little one that I'll read here. Luke, thanks again. And Gnashing Teeth, thank you guys too. Yeah, this is just cool. This is like the highlight of my weekend, so I'm stoked about it. This poem is called BBC. A young man lifts his hands to the sun, and the sun becomes honey. He opens his mouth to the moon, and the moon becomes breath mints. The young man listens to the sea, and the sea becomes S's and O's. There are more things that become things than time to describe things. The young man quietly dies, and the news becomes lamplight. Thank you.
Gorgeous, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. Our next poet, Frances Klein. Frances is an Alaskan poet and teacher. She is the 2022 winner of the Robert Golden Poetry Prize. Way to go. Congratulations. And the author of the chapbooks New and Permanent and The Best Kept Secret. Klein serves as assistant editor for the Southern Humanities Review. Take it away.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Just as I'm thinking about Luke's work, I will say that his chapbook Purge was the highlight of my family Christmas, which is very kind of an odd thing to say, but my father-in-law was walking past our bookshelf and saw really the striking cover of that chapbook and picked it up and then sat down and ignored everyone for an hour while he read through the chapbook. And then that's all he talked about. He was showing people poems throughout. And so the previous family Christmas that we had was all about Luke's work, which was a great way to spend a holiday. I am going to read just a few, kind of like the other readers. I tried to pick some things that were, in this case, family related. So I'm going to start with a poem called Growing Up Golem. The golem's parents are at their wits' end. They don't know what to do with this creature that woke up one day a stranger. How carefully they once gathered the clay, formed its limbs, inscribed the sacred word to place into its waiting mouth. Now the golem stays out late, dresses provocatively. It comes home with smudged eyeliner, smelling of mango vape smoke. The golem's parents are attending workshops, reading from Emmet to Met, talking so your golem will listen, listening to what your golem can't say. Still, the golem's failing classes, ignoring the teachers, breaking up with a new boy every week, and cyberbullying all its exes. The suspension slips pile up like maple leaves in October. The golem's parents enlist a therapist, a tutor, a rabbi, and a cool college student from the Troubled Youth Mentor Center. The golem flips them all the bird and runs away for the whole weekend. State troopers pull up with the golem sniffling in the back seat. It will not say where it's been. While the golem curls up exhausted under a patchwork quilt of shirts it has outgrown, its parents stand in the doorway at the border of this country to which they have no passports and have long forgotten the language. Next, I'm going to go ahead and read one that is forthcoming from Cultural Daily, and it is called Prayer for the Dudes Who Catcalled Me in Front of My Toddler. And it's after the Lucille Clifton poem, Prayer for Sons. I pray you reach your destination safely, but upon arriving, realize that you have forgotten all the balloons for the douchebag parade. I pray the other douchebags never forgive you. I pray you get your heart broken by a mediocre white girl while your favorite song is playing. The joy the notes once conjured dissipates like her cucumber melon body mist. I pray that the people with whom you are most open and vulnerable describe you as a friend of a friend. I pray unending taint itch through all of your days. I pray doctors who care for you as lovingly and attentively as they do women in pain. I pray rain and the window of your car cracked just enough. I pray $2 in your account and 2 weeks until payday. I pray crunch of dry ramen when the power company cuts the cord. I pray your loved ones are alive, healthy, and disappointed in what you have made of yourself. I pray all the porn videos you watch glitch right before the money shot. I pray for you fear, hot and coppery. I pray every time you step on an elevator, you feel the bottom fall out of your stomach. That same startled alarm I saw in my son's eyes when he heard the Doppler keen of your scream going by. And I'm going to end with a prose poem from a collection that I am kind of shopping around, working on. This is a prose poem called The Angel Gabriel Says It's Not a Booty Call If He Doesn't Have Genitals. And he doesn't. He comes over at 3 a.m., pulls down his joggers, and shows me what he calls the light of pure goodness. The light seems mediocre at best, but I go along with it. The angel Gabriel wants intimacy in these smallest hours of the morning, so we compare embarrassing adolescent photos, me with my self-cut baby bangs, him with his infinite number of eyes. He lays on my bed, head hanging over the edge, legs stretched up against the wall. We kiss once as sunrise checks its watch on the other side of the horizon, but the angel Gabriel doesn't know how. He pulls his lips all the way back, meets mine with his perfectly straight, dry teeth. We lay side by side, and I fall asleep somewhere in the middle of the angel Gabriel telling me which US presidents are in hell, which is all of them. In the morning, the pillow still holds the indent of his head. And that's going to be it for me. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Luke and Gnashing Teeth, for asking me.
Thank you, Frances. That was awesome. Awesome. I'm going to need to find your books. Mr. Wortley, are you ready to bless us, sir?
Yeah, let's keep the expectations slightly lower so that I can exceed them.
Let me read your bio real quick, and then you can take it away. Luke is originally from Simpsonville, Kentucky, and his beloved bluegrass state features prominently in his work. He has a BA in Spanish from Wright State University and an MFA from Butler University, where he was the former fiction editor of Booth, a journal. After a few years in high schools as a graduate assistant, volunteer, and ultimately a Spanish teacher, he began working for a population and public health not-for-profit as a grant writer and a program director for community outreach among underserved populations. Luke has also been an adjunct professor at Butler University, teaching Latin American history and first-year seminar. He writes short fiction, flash variants, and prose poetry. He lives in Indianapolis with his partner, children, dog, and cats. Take it away, sir.
Thanks, Jennifer. I wish Karen were here, but I know that she had to be away. For those of you who don't know, Karen Klein Tardif is the editor-in-chief of Gnashing Teeth, and she's been the one that I've worked with most extensively on a lot of the logistics, but Jennifer is the developmental and copy editor at Gnashing Teeth, and they have shaped the book into something that I'm very proud of. So thank you to Gnashing Teeth. Quinn, I didn't realize that we were mates in both Chestnut Review and Tramp Set, so that's kind of cool. And I love your work on queer parenthood, something that I struggle to find the language for, and I gain solace in your work. Will, I was an early reader on Sandbox, and I'm so happy to see it out, and it's an absolute backbreaker. The way that you can compress and compress and compress into something that I could never do, that's just a skill I don't have, and I love that collection, so I can't wait to get my hands on it. And then Francis, I've known for about 7 years now, maybe even longer now I think about it, almost 8 years at this point. We were actually teachers together at one of the high schools here in Indianapolis, and she's not only an amazing poet, but perhaps one of the most talented and diligent educators I've ever met. So I'm so happy to have all of you all here. And I see so many people. I've caught a couple folks joining on Facebook Live and then here on Zoom. Everybody I know, names that I was hoping to see, and I'm so happy. So I thought about how I was gonna approach the actual composition of how to do the reading, and I think I'm gonna go off script for the first poem here, which is actually a brand new work that does center on sort of an epilogue of this collection that features Kentucky prominently and the home where a lot of these events and shared blood take place. And it was not part of this collection, but I wrote it probably a year after I ended up shopping it around. So I'm going to start with that, and then we'll get to the actual book. So this is called What is Remembered on Connor Station Road in Simpsonville, Kentucky. I went to go visit my childhood home and found that it wasn't there. The sharpness of its absence, needle thin and rank with suspicion, as I remembered the night my father tackled me in the backyard, slick with drink. Where could it have gone? Or is it because I'm looking that it is simply hiding, beckoning me to go searching? There was also this time my sister wrecked the ATV by speeding through a large divot in the back 40. She woke up from anesthesia after the skin graft and smacked my father in the face for not having popcorn. It always seems so solid, this home, and here it is completely leveled. No trace of it. The fuzziness of the back porch wearing on my mind as I couldn't remember how many steps it took to get up the path, dotted with Virginia Slims that my mom thought we didn't know she smoked. The massive sycamores out front stood sentinel, and their curly-cued shedding littered the front yard. The house was an old colonial, but as I stood there, I barely remembered the color of the shutters, tracing the memory back like blood. Was it deep red or blue? For some reason, all that kept coming to me was the ghost of that girl who died in the creek of blood poisoning, the way her laughter trickled up the fence line. Her name was Sarah. There was burying my first dog by the washout basin, and yet the floral wallpaper is gone, the black and white starkness of the checkered tile in the kitchen that made no sense, that irritated my mom up until it was all over. When the family sundered and the house was sold on the cheap just to be done with it and split up whatever was left. It was an old home, full of the corrosive end of multiple generations of other families, and the regret hung in it, lacquering the baseboards, dusting the mantle. In the distance, the neighing of a thoroughbred, the swish of an equine tail. I remember the time I fell down the stairs in the unfinished basement and nearly ruptured my spleen. how the neighbor boy's older brother hopped the fence and helped carry me to the car, how he died nearly a decade later to save a drowning woman in the Ohio River. How this family had broken too, that both of our fathers had done a number on us, and perhaps it was baked into this land, the teeming bunches of fescue and thistle, perhaps laden with old guilt, with generational trauma. I remember the cutting and hanging of the tobacco, the way the leaves hung like tortoise shells to dry. My sister and I don't talk much anymore, but when we do, we never talk about this house, this land. My mother and I can't get over it. We lament it late into the night with bourbon on the tongue, eggs of our own experience tucked into our palms, ready to spill their yolk of fury. There was the good crystal my mom kept in the pie safe with aluminum panels dotted with indentations of roses. And there was the time the fondue sizzled and popped the grease all the way to the ceiling. What color was my room again? And why was my mattress on the floor in the basement? This old house seemed to have stood forever in my youth, and yet I couldn't tell you the year it was built. I could only point to the shackles and the coins and the artillery rounds dug up under the county landmark oak in the front corner facing Connor Station Road. I remember the exact moment I gave up on prayer in that house. And as I turned to leave, having been unable to locate the place, a dragonfly landed on the hood of my car. So I'll start at the beginning with Shared Blood. This is the very first poem in the collection. It's called Expecting. For those of you who don't know, the book centers on sort of intergenerational wordplay between a father and a son, becoming fathers, being sons, you know, trying to thread that needle. So the book opens with the speaker expecting their first child. When I open my front door, I see that the porch has turned into a clutch of eggs, all of them dumb and round and nestled tightly, packed in like pebbles on a drive. I'm afraid to step out and see what the temperature actually feels like other than a swipe of my hands, fingers slipping through the frigid air. I'm a mess. I don't know how to care for these eggs, how to keep them warm. The first gauzy drips of snow lean on the breeze like lace. I can't care for them all. Even so, I grab all the blankets in the house, pause at the door, and toss them. The wind screeches to life, and they land haphazardly in a pile some feet away, useless. It's too far to jump over all these eggs, and the temperature is dropping. Then I feel my skin coming undone, the bonds decoupling from tendon and bone, and I'm nearly blown away as I stretch to transform into the mantle of flesh. All of me stretches out of necessity to cover the porch. Under me, I hear the whispering cries giving way to the quiet stupefaction of the entire nest. The next one is pretty early on in the collection as well. This is relatively personal, as our youngest son was a NICU baby for a couple weeks early on in the pandemic, and it was a strange time just because you couldn't nobody could be there, you know, and so we were just taking shifts in and out, you know, sleeping in the room once they got us one, and yeah, so it was weird, but he's all good now, and everything's wonderful. But this one is called Cry. And thanks to the Cincinnati Review for picking this one up in their micro series, which was coincidentally edited by Taylor Baez, who also blurbed the book and has her own debut full length called I Done Clicked My Heel 3 Times. And it's also wonderful. So it's called Cry. When he's born, there is silence and there are wires, the beeping whine of machines and the stale odor of latex. Not long after, we're in the hot breath of the NICU, and the first scream blooms like a wound. Lightning quick, the way it unhinges my ear, undoes the surgical calm of night. I'm amazed by the use of breath, the way it careens in all of us, this storm in our son's mouth. I marvel at the tremulous nature of his grasp, the laborious intake. Each time it delays, I freeze, delve deeper into the porous stone of my wavering heart. I take my wife's hand and we watch the monitor zip and undulate. I'm aware of the sudden lack of wind in the room, the cold embrace of sterile gloves as more thunder ripples from his mouth, sending us for cover as we brace for the coming quiet. I think, yeah, I'll skip that one. We'll go here. So this one's called Patrilineal. And this is where the title actually comes from. So hope you all enjoy. The other night, I tilted a bottle over the edge of the bonfire and watched the smoke plume into my dead granddad's form. The one I never knew. The one who survived 2 train crashes and a hive of yellow jackets but succumbed to blood poisoning. He motioned and I followed him to the creek bed. As we walked, he told me of a time when he buried his own shadow, how his fingers sprouted up and he jammed them back down. He told me how it struggled, how this first death was to prove to his own father that he could stomach the act. When I asked him why he did it, he said he had to prepare for the vehemence of the land, the inevitability of its thirst. He said his own father spoke in thunderous gulps and tinny sounds sloshing in the bottle. They said he never was much of a talker. I beg to differ. Frog song lay on the air like a veil as we walked back up the valley. Sliced with moonlight, we kept wandering. Him stooping in a smoky wave, sliding through the shimmer. Another night, tilting another bottle, my father told me of his first kill, a squirrel jittering up a tree, the crazy thwack of a pellet into the back of its twitchy head. He said it stiffened and fell, the grass stroked with garnet as it flopped and squealed. So I asked my granddad about that, felt my throat tighten as his mouth opened. I was expecting some defense, perhaps a winding apology. What came out was a train whistle hammering the breeze, blowing over me in a dry heat, his breath loud and furious, brushed with the tang of shared blood. Yeah, we'll drop that one too. So the next one is called Foot Sweep. Content warning, it's a bit about parental violence, so just as a heads up there if you want to sit this one out. It's called Foot Sweep. For those of you who don't know, I guess there's a little bit of context here. I was a very high level competitive judoka for many years, and my dad was my sensei as well as my coach. So foot sweeps are a big part of that sport, you know, either to set up a larger throw or sometimes even as an attack in and of themselves, and can be devastatingly effective when somebody does not engage in those kinds of like body movements. They don't know where to put their feet and you can really take them out. So this is where this comes from. And yet I crave the slippage of clavicle, the resurrected din of mandible jutting beside a wrecked fist. I'm a little lazy on the specific, or a little hazy on the specifics of a smoky chest, a billowing set of teeth strewn across the lawn. Of fatherhood, I must say there's a certain set of circumstances that come bearing down at full tilt as soon as a slender digit slices open or a tight scream rumbles into the space between humbled breaths, a threaded submission in my throat. I find that it's hardly worth the weight of knees. Against the onslaught of the memory, I contort my stomach into an imperfect array of armored plates, try and deflect or simply lay prone on the bluegrass, stare at the twisting vertebrae of stars. I admit that I might be misremembering this time out in the yard when my feet got taken out, my father's arms sliding, his hands jeweled by moonlight. I should mention that I skipped the part where we've been hammering back yowls of bourbon, throats kindled and spent roughing up the air in a storm of silence and glaze of ethereal praise. To the point that it was a blinding spin of perpetuity when they came down on my chest and chin. Pinned to the soil, I still writhe to the beat of pummeling hands, to the bobbing of an Adam's apple, taking a shot. So maybe one that's a little bit more lighthearted here. This one actually appeared in Had. It's called Monster. And it's just a short little narrative. My son and I are on a hike. I'm tying my son's shoes when a monster crawls out of the woods and devours us whole. We barely avoid the teeth on the way down its gullet, slipping painfully into the cavernous stomach. We wander around for hours until we hear a rumbling above. Throughout the next few days, the monster swallows another father and son, followed by still more pairs of fathers and sons, until we populate the bottom of the stomach and whisper greetings to each other, decide that yes, this is our life now, and we better make the most of it. So we build a city in the stomach and listen for the soft rumbling here and there that means our population has grown. On my way to the grocery store, I befriend another father named Marcus, who affectionately changes my name every time I see him in the weeks to come. I never correct him. We share a beer and watch our sons play together in the park. It suddenly occurs to us that we haven't heard the rumbling since we met. We awkwardly part ways after a few looks upward toward the mammoth throat. The city goes quiet, all the traffic stops, and the slow silence sets in. Nobody talks for weeks after that, and everyone stays in their spacious modern apartments, not venturing out except to go to the store, and even then, everything is done quietly. The only blips of sound ringing out of the cash registers. The quiet drags on, and eventually we all forget each other's names, until one day we hear the rumbling above and cheer wildly. I do have to say that final line is perhaps a not so subtle homage to the short story The School by Don Bartolome. If you're not familiar with that school, it's sort of an escalating sense of death, and then at the very end, the children all cheer when they are like sort of egging on a sexually explicit encounter between two teachers. It's an odd story, but wonderful. So I have just a couple more here in the interest of time. This one's called Fence Post. I'll start with the son, the one who watched his father's arms uncurl in sunlight, watched his calves pulse when he dug a new hole for a fence post all those years ago. I'll start with the father, the one who uncurled his arms in broad daylight just to show his son what he expected, who sank the post hole digger into the earth as though driving a stake through the monster's heart. Either way, what I have is a picture of acquiescence and militance, a portrait of relationship bound to a single moaning dread. What I have is something that I can't divorce that I can't divorce from the I, from the we, from the father and son, the son who has become the father. When he's moved out, left my mother, and gone to live with another family, I drive back down to the house, get out and walk to that fence post, take in the solidity of it, the darkness of the paint, heat boiling in my throat. I can see the imperfections, all the nooks and crannies of labor and wear, of callous dismissal and bourbon-laced shouts, followed by caresses repeating, "You're my best friend. You know that, right?" I can see the shadow of my father's arms reaching, looking to clobber me all over again, this time from somewhere else. So I will, we'll get rid of this one, but we're gonna go. So this one returns to the speaker becoming a father. This one's called Shrink. My son keeps getting smaller. One day, he's the size of a tumbler glass. The next, a bouncy ball. My wife and I take turns holding him in our palms, holding him up to the light to make sure he's still there. We buy microscopes just to be prepared. Always have a magnifying glass on hand. We take him to the doctor, who says it's just a phase, that it'll all work out in the end. But we're not so sure. When he's the size of a single water droplet, we're convinced that we'll lose him for good. I'm watching him nestle into the creases of my right hand, wave my magnifying glass over top to check for the faintest hint of breath. Even as I hold him, he feels impossibly far away, trapped somewhere. When I can't stand the weightlessness of his tiny form, I pass him to my wife, who holds him up to her mouth. So the final Yeah, these are the last ones. So there's a set of like 4 diptychs in the collection that are deliberately kind of paired together, where one is like from this is the thing of the son and this is the thing of the father, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to read you one half of a couple of those diptychs and close out with the final poem in the collection here. So this one's called Portrait of a Son. The sun is a scythe ripping through the grain, a ringing endorsement of inherited violence, is nestled in the haunches of his father's legacy and careening through memory, can be defined only by the vehemence of blood, the gorgeous wrapping of hands around an upper arm, and the march to the fence line. Is grieving his estranged father despite his wife's protestations, and despite the fact that he's very much alive, but just living with another family. Is undressing in the middle of the night and looking for something to hunt. Is drinking too much, hiding the filigreed remains of wanton sex and the too close utterances of the other, standing over the toilet with a finger down his throat. The sun is the open wound, the intractable thirst for what's gone forever. So last 2 here, one's short, one's like sort of mid-length here. This one is called The Confessions of the Sun. Sometimes I think my father is gone. When this happens, I wonder if I'm gone too. There is no father without the sun. I stood on a promontory naked and dared the wind to push me off. The wind was so frightened of my pelvis that it retreated and blew me back onto more solid ground. I cursed the wind for its garish show of strength and put my clothes back on. My father wouldn't have approved. A dying star wandered into me. I reached out to shake its hand, and it wanted nothing to do with me. I told it how my father dragged me through the fescue and made me king of a patch of dirt, and it got teary-eyed. Great ribbons of galaxy dust spewed from its face, and I wrapped my arms around it, leaned in for a kiss. The last woman I dated was afraid I'd leave her for a man who looked like my father. I turned my hair into kindling for a bonfire, and it burned for an entire month. I never had to feed it anything else except my hair, but it was my father's hands who made the pile to begin with. I kiss with cold breath. It's extremely off-putting until the tongue becomes accustomed, feels all the undulating pressure. From what my father has told me, this is normal. When I look through the old photographs on my phone, I find that my father isn't in any of them. There's just a smudge of color. Sometimes cyan, my son's favorite color. And when my son sees it, he looks at me with sweeping gray eyes, almost as if to ask, is this what it all means? I keep scrolling, unwilling to just acknowledge his questioning face. I move to more pictures of our old cat, the one we put down just before a storm dashed itself against our living room window. My wife's fingernails detach and flutter into the fireplace. I confess there is too much to confess. My tattoos are all moving to different parts of my body. My father has more tattoos than me, but I like mine better. Plus, they move. When it snows, I hide under my desk and can't write because of the silence. The first time I made myself throw up, a gleaming deer ricocheted out of my throat and plopped into the toilet. I lifted it up, water falling off its coat. It pranced in my palm, waiting. There is no sun without the father. At night, I consort with the whales. I find the arcing bones irresistible. The wisdom of their solemn cries piercing and dark and filling. I want to destroy them. I want to be them. I want nothing more than to take my own whale form so that I can hate my body all over again. If my father were to die before we reconnected, I think the world might stop spinning. There might be a cataclysmic silence brewing in my son's throat. There might be more cicadas than usual. There might be a loving embrace between my wife and me, a tightening of shoulders. There might be a few bricks missing, the structure precarious. There might be a ghoul running rampant through a suburban park. There might be all manner of detritus washing up on shores, on front porches. There might be bullet casings littering the parking lot of a grocery store. There might be occasion to get the grill out and have a massive cookout. There also might be nothing at all. So I will close with a shorter poem called Fire. Sometimes I imagine the renovation of soul, how I might pack up a set of fine tools and poke around, chip away, steal the shavings of self, how the entire act may be clandestine, as though trying to hide from fate lurking in the creases of my fingers. Or it might be brazen, a bare-knuckle dismantling of a slab of memory that will pass into the roiling ocean concealed in my throat. In each case, the polishing of desire might reflect itself in the dappled remembrance of a father's touch. I think to myself as I work that perhaps where there's smoke, there really is fire. And that fire is so hot, it may burn the very walls I'm brushing, that it may ignite being and let it emerge slick and wind whipped. With fire, there are two guarantees. It burns both up and down. But incineration is part of the process of becoming the sun. Then again, I suppose I can stop whenever and can decide never to begin. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Luke. Amazing. I was reliving different times when we were in the middle of readings. Woo! I get emotional. Before we open it up to questioning, just a couple of little points. If any of you know someone who was trying to get in and couldn't get in and gave up, the video will be available on Facebook in a couple hours.
I was gonna say, we've got a video on demand of this as well, so.
Yep, absolutely.
I also, I do want to give just a tiny shout out. I think my sibling and their partner are on. My thesis advisor and one of my greatest mentors throughout graduate school, Susan Neville, is on. A great friend, dear writer, an amazing peer, and like queer father to me, Earl Carrender, is on. Old friend from college, both Ian Gibson and Anna Wyra Forrester. Ben is on, he blurbed the book, and another dear friend who's a little bit newer to my life since I moved to Indy, but nevertheless has a spot in my heart. I have Josh as well. So thank you all for coming. And Carla, your review and trampoline was so amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here. I can tell it really means a lot to Luke. The only other thing I was going to say is if anyone has not already pre-ordered the book, you can do so on gnashingteethpublishing.com. I wanted to say something to Francis. I don't know if you've looked at our other work that we have on the website to buy, but we published one called Sleep Cinematic or a Golem's Quartet, and it made me laugh when you read that poem. It's a whole book-length poem, but it had a lot of thematic similarities to yours, so you might find that interesting. Just wanted to say that. And I think I'll open it up to questions now.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So, Luke, when I was writing the review, one thing I really wondered about is how your experience, I see that you've written fiction and you were a fiction editor, how your experience of writing fiction influenced the way, if it influenced the way you wrote these poems. And I have to say to those of you who haven't read this, this really does read like a novel. I mean, I did read it in one sitting. I could not stop reading it. So it had that pacing that I associate with fiction. So that's the question. You're on mute.
The classic Zoom thing. I'm also a work from home person, so you'd think I'd be more attuned to that. But I don't know. I mean, I think it helped more for me, not necessarily in the composition of individual works, because I read a lot, probably more poetry than I do fiction, all things considered. So a lot of that was sort of poetic indulgence on my part, because while I love a lot of the sort of like ethos of especially contemporary poetry over the last, I don't know, 70 years, right? that like is all about compression and cutting and, you know, taking a scalpel to it. I'm just not that way. Like, I'm sort of Baroque. And so the fiction experience, I think, helped me structure the whole more than anything. And that's really only a realization I'm having now in retrospect. Just because I used to also be on an editorial board for the small press that Butler University used to host, and we would read, you know, story collection after story collection after story collection, and you got to see kind of, you know, where things became books and where they were just a smattering of work, right? And so I think that that's something that helped. I don't know. I mean, I've always had a penchant for narrative. I've always liked it, but I'm not sure that I could say that writing fiction was necessarily a huge influence on individual poems in the collection. I hope that that's a satisfactory answer.
Anyone else?
And if you don't want to come off mute, you can always type in the chat too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I actually have a question about a lot of your Luke, a lot of your work is very surreal, and I think as I was watching the chat, people were commenting very positively on just how weird some things can get. So I was wondering, for your writing process, let me see if I can make this make sense. Do you start weird and then go to various themes, or are you writing with like a theme or a point in mind and then like add the weirdness later?
Oh, it's very much the former. It is very much start high concept. What if this happened? Is almost invariably the question that I begin with, way more so than any kind of thematic concern. I know you know this, Francis, and I know Susan as well, but as an undergraduate Spanish, you know, major, I actually came in to undergraduate taking 300 and 400 level seminars just because of my AP score. So I was able to just like gorge myself on the modernists, the confessionals who came after the American wave of confessional poets who like got to read Lowell and Sexton and Plath and translation, and then also the boom of the 1980s where magical realism got its name, and you know, all of those folks. And so like I was really taken with that. But I also, like, as an aspiring academic, realized that magical realism is a term that's kind of reserved for a very particular socio-political and historical context. And I don't lay claim to that title, but I do like the idea of asking, well, what if you just acted like this was the new physics of the world, right? So that's where I start.
Ken had a question to build off that one. When you're starting with the weird, you start with the weird from a language or descriptive perspective? Like, are you focusing on a jarring combination of words or a jarring image that you're creating?
Ooh. Yes. And Storm, thanks for being here. I know you and Casey are in the room. Storm's a very good friend of mine who is also a writer in his own right. He writes everything from literary fiction to high fantasy to political fantasy and everything in between, sci-fi. I mean, you name it. And he's got a sterling list of publications. I highly recommend you check out his stuff. I also forgot, because she's not on camera anymore, but Laura Todd is in the house. She was perhaps one of the largest influences on me actually like getting back into writing after nearly a 2.5-year hiatus. We had taken a 1-story online workshop together and managed to form a small cohort that stuck around probably for 3 years or so of workshopping short fiction and novel excerpts for the most part. But Laura and I have become much more than just peers and colleagues. She's a steadfast champion of my work and somebody who I admire tremendously. So thanks for being here, Laura. But yeah, Storm, to answer your question, I'm much generally when I'm writing fiction, more interested in the image. And when I'm writing in prose poetry or lineated verse, I'm much more interested in sort of jarring combinations of words, and then just kind of like spool out from there. So it sort of changes with genre, I think. See, Wyatt asks, what is the longest writing session you have had in one setting? And how can you advise resting with an idea or taking action with developing the narrative in relation to the idea during a, oh, geez. I'm actually much more of a short burst person. I'm a pretty fast typer. Usually if I can get into a flow state, I'm usually between 85 and 100 words a minute. So I tend to only write for maybe a couple hours tops. And then I'm just like kind of fried egg up here, just because I'm really moving at the speed of my thoughts and I'm just exhausted. So I'd say about, yeah, 60 minutes to 120 minutes is about where I cap out. But maintaining that momentum for me is not, I think it's funny because for me, the best thing I ever did for writing fiction was read more poetry. So, and not just because it's like, you know, this like sort of supposedly superior art form, but just like thinking of like how words fit together and how space is used and how beats and rhythm and all of these different things can combine even in a densely packed paragraph. So I tend to not lose momentum because even if I lose track of the image or the concept or the story, I can just play around with words for a while and keep typing, and then eventually I might be able to circle back to it, you know. So I think that that's probably how I approach it.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay.
Do you think
Oh,
poetry? Storm says, do you think poetry helps you bring more power to a tighter economy of words in a short story than someone else might use? I mean, I think that poems and short stories are better cousins than even short stories and novellas or novels. So, in a word, yes. But I think actually, you know, it's funny because I never set out to write at a particular like word count or length. So, and I can get incredibly verbose. So it's not like I'm, you know, always thinking cut. But yeah, I think you're probably onto something there, Storm. I think that's right. I just like, it feels right. It rings true to me that like, yeah, I do think poetry, being familiar with it, understanding a wide swath of it, right? You know, not just, you know, what you like, but also kind of delving into, you know, a wide range of schools and historical contexts. And if you can read another language, even better, right? To really kind of see how it affects your own work. Yeah.
anyone else? Thank you, Luke. Those were great questions. Thanks, everybody. I think we'll close it up. I want to say thank you again to William Erickson and Francis Klein and QuinnRennerfeldt. I was not familiar with the three of you, but I enjoyed your readings thoroughly, and we'll check you out. One more time, if you want to pre-order Shared Blood by Luke Wortley, go look for it on gnashingteethpublishing.com. And we really enjoyed everyone being here today. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone. Bye-bye.
I'll stick around with you, Jennifer, if you need to.
I'm good. Whatever you want to do.
Okay, no worries.
Great job.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just make sure everybody, if anybody was frustrated, just let them know that there will be a video on Facebook. So it'll be fine.
I will make a post that there will be a VOD.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay. Anything you need from me?
Not right now. I
Good.
think we're good.
Okay, cool. Talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.